Thanks, Amesh. So just to quickly introduce ourselves, I'm Simi Serene. I have my colleague Shravan here. And as Sumesh very nicely explained, we have been working with our friends at UK government, Karthik, Anirban, Rex, and many more over the last few months to essentially build evidence-based thesis that investments are possible and viable in areas beyond renewable energy and electric mobility, which are the two mature sectors that India has seen. We have a short presentation to present the key findings from this report, after which we have a stellar panel for you to talk about their experience from the ground. So Shravan, if you just want to kick us off with the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you IIC for giving us this platform, and especially thank you FCDO for the support. We really enjoyed actually doing the research for this presentation because it allowed us to really expand and look at where we can actually, we could really take a global perspective on what opportunity really is, other than the common refrain that, India to hona chahiye, it's not possible here. So what we really wanted to do with this report, can I just know how I can change slides? Is there a clicker? Oh, thank you. Perfect. Okay, thank you. I don't think I'll talk too much about what we do in Climate, but we're basically a climate finance advisory firm. We work across the global south, predominantly in India, but our core focus is how do we bring in more capital into the climate space. And this was the problem statement. This is the context that we're dealing with India. 80% of private capital has gone towards renewable energy and electric mobility. While these are significant sectors, there are great successes to be had here. We need to expand climate finance flows and climate action in other sectors. So this was the basic problem statement that we started this research from because, and this has been a common refrain, I'm sure, for most people, fund managers and other people in this room. So when we started working with FCDO, we kind of boiled the whole area that we wanted to dive into two core areas. What are other private finance opportunities in emerging climate mitigation and adaptation? For the longest time, adaptation has been dealt as a public good. Government is going to solve for it, government is going to fund it. But we fundamentally believe, and we have spent the last 2-3 years working on the fact that private finance opportunities are significant in adaptation. But what is exactly that? What is the data? What is the basis for us to have that statement? And we realized that globally, there are examples. We can point to evidence globally. But then also it's important for us to say that how can those global lessons, how can those global experiences translate to the Indian context? What can we learn? And what are the lessons that can come into this? So these were the key questions, and those were the key research areas we looked at. We wanted to get as focused towards, this is a study which is very focused towards the fund manager's perspective. We wanted to look at what are returns being experienced across the entire spectrum. And one of the key decisions that we took was we wanted to focus not on the performance of companies, but the performance of funds. So all the data that we look at here is basically funds where more than 50% of their portfolio comes into this emerging mitigation and adaptation segment, which, as Somesh mentioned, is 13 sectors which we have divided and boiled down to. So the 13 sectors, it's, I know, a bit of a detailed chart, and I know the bottom part is being cut off, this is sectors which I think we are very familiar with to some extent. Food systems and agri is a fairly burgeoning and emerging sector which is going globally. And like I said, these investments and the number of deals that have been identified here come from funds that we have identified where more than 50% of the portfolio covers across all these sectors. And it has a lot of, and there are certain trends that we can see, which is also very commonplace in India. The first 3 sectors on food systems, energy resilience, which is where your batteries and your grids come in, and waste circularity, also count for some of the largest significant spaces in India in terms of what is capital flow outside of renewable energy and mitigation, and what is future opportunity which is in place. But then also, like we see in different places in India, there is a tail off of certain segments which is significantly nascent, and we see capital flows being reflected in this. But we believe these 13 sectors are private finance opportunity areas. Within these 13 sectors, we identified, I think, 46 business models and business areas which could actually be potential private finance opportunity areas. And before I hand it off to Simi, I will just make a point that we're just finalizing this research. We will be publishing it as a public document by around November 10th. So if anyone's interested in further details, we will be able to share that information to you. And it's, as Anirban and Karthik will attest to it, it's quite a detailed document of what we've tried to do. We've tried to really capture what is happening globally and how does it tangibly work from an Indian perspective, and what are the gaps and barriers for that adoption. Now, I'll pass it to Sydney. Yeah.
Thank you.
The big button, the big one.
Awesome. So essentially, the idea was to figure out, can funds invest in emerging sectors? Which essentially means that we looked globally to about 4,000 funds that have done some kind of climate investments and looked through, can we find funds who have primarily done emerging investments, and by emerging, I mean either emerging mitigation or adaptation. We found about 82 funds and did a deep dive into their portfolios to see what are they investing in and does it make commercial sense, because if you are an LP investing in a fund like this, will you make return? Or if you're a fund manager, can you make return? Beyond the numbers on where these funds come from, I think the key highlight that I would like to show you is that yes, you can make returns. We actually went through the thousands of investments that these funds have made and looked through, do this investment generate return? And it turns out that overall, on average, these funds' portfolios have generated 3.45x returns for their investors. This is not over the entire fund life. Many of these funds are new. Most emerging mitigation adaptation funds came into being in the last 5 years, so they're still through their fund cycles and will eventually have much higher returns. But even today, even in the first 5 years or 7 years of the operations, they are providing significant returns to their LPs, which means that globally it has made sense for fund managers to build funds that invest in areas that go beyond mature climate, that look at what we think of as more cutting-edge investments, supporting entrepreneurs that are building, diverse businesses. We even found one fund that only invests in wildfires and how to address that, or one fund that only invests in marine ecosystems, and surprisingly providing great returns to their investors. So what does that mean in terms of which sectors are providing returns? So we mapped each of the 13 sectors into their return profile. And what kind of returns that they have provided to their investors. So the large sectors, surprisingly, we have a lot of investments early, have also done well, but a big surprise to us was waste and circular economy. Now that's incidentally a sector that even India has focused on. I know, Sumesh, you mentioned that big waste-to-value plant in Indore. We have seen many more investments come in, but even globally, that's one of the best performing sector, as are areas around energy innovation, so new forms of energy like geothermal or nuclear, as well as more sustainable materials. So while we do think it is early days for areas like green steel or green cement, many of the sustainable material investments are already providing great returns to their investors. So areas well worth looking into. Finally, we took all of these insights from what has happened globally to look at all the different drivers of how does this translate to India. And Sharon, we want to talk about what drivers we looked at and how we kind of did a framework for relevance to India.
Yeah. So, so fundamentally contextualizing what works in India is very dependent on context. So we looked at these 8 broad criteria, and within that we had sub-drivers, sub-criteria to try and identify it. And it ranged from everything from market opportunity, business model viability, what is the potential of TRL of solutions globally and in India, the nature of policy support, which is one of the most fundamental things we have seen is that policy direction tends to drive a path for where climate finance and climate action is going to grow. And we also kind of looked at, it's important to also see what has happened from a global perspective, what are the nature of exits globally, because these are the lessons and this is evidence we can point to say that this particular type of solution works, this particular type of company has a certain amount of potential. And it's unsurprising, I think, that the first sort of 3-4 sectors are sectors which work in the mix of both adaptation and mitigation as well, where mitigation is a consistent part of it, because mitigation has been the more dominant focus that we have seen. But I think this whole aspect around co-benefits is a very significant part that we've seen emerging a lot more, especially in resilient food systems. Today, our solution around climate, around agriculture, is on food security, which is about addressing against climate effects, not just on methane reduction and emission reduction around the space. So we believe the nature of how things are going to evolve is these co-benefit sectors are going to provide an initial opportunity before we go to more focused more adaptation-only segments, which has definitely been the secondary focus for a lot of capital flows and action to actually pick up.